You know, today is a whole lot of different days all at the same time because we're 2 days away from Swami's Moksha Day. So this is also, and we're, just a week away from Easter. And it's quite a season. And we're right in the middle of God knows what. And actually, we really, we have no idea where we are right now. This is like unprecedented in human history. I was absolutely delighted by my friend Shurjo in Mumbai, who was commenting about uh, how quickly the entire globe has been shifted into something that we've never done before, that nobody knows anything about. That, that all the presidents and prime ministers and multi-billionaires and docs, everybody's just scrambling, trying to make sense of a little protein encased in fat. And he just was saying that it's not possible for any human being to have created this. And he just said it so simply, Babaji must have done it, because it's too big and it's too strange and it's too out of nowhere. And it has all of humanity. I mean, like someone else is pulling the strings. I actually gave one of my morning broadcasts was simply called Who's Pulling the Strings? Because it's all so odd. Um, Living with Swamiji, for living closely with him for as many years as we did, he wrote the book, The Road Ahead, about 1972, I think. It could have been as late as 1973, but it was a long time ago. And he wrote that Master said that there would be that the world would be transformed, and he didn't. It wasn't a pretty picture. The ultimate transformation Master described was very attractive, but the process of getting there was not attractive. Not attractive from the egoic point of view. And Swamiji put it out there quite unequivocally, quite fearlessly, but without the slightest effort to comfort us. He just presented it as he presented all truth, which is just matter of factly, with the idea that what is, and the devotee simply has to look life straight in the eye and see the play of God behind it and flow with it. And a tremendous amount of what was done at Ananda was done in the context of the urgency to establish ourselves in spiritual practice while it was a luxury and not an absolute necessity. And every year, literally every year, I was with Swami for 45 years. Every year, he would speculate as to whether this was the year when everything would come to pieces and life as we know it would be changed. And every year it wasn't. I mean, Swamiji was never embarrassed. He never apologized. He and Jyotish would joke about that they were going to become psychics, because every time anyone predicted an earthquake, they would predict that there wasn't one going to be one, and they would always be right. I mean, so he never staked his ego was never involved. He was always just an interested truth seeker. And as he said himself, being the head of a large organization responsible for so many people, he had to pay attention. He didn't have the luxury of just saying that society didn't matter and that he didn't have to pay any attention to world events. And besides, he'd been a king in so many incarnations and a ruler. It was just second nature to him to think in terms of decisions that influence countries and influence the whole globe and so on like that. And from another level too, it was so interesting. When Swami went to India in 2003, 2004, he went right at the end of 2003, and he started doing tapasya through his body right away. And he ended up in the hospital with double pneumonia. It was all very, very dramatic. He himself would laugh at it. It was all so dramatic. And And the doctors there were supposed to be taking care of him, but you may remember one of the doctors appealed to Swamiji because the doctor said, in order to support my son in Canada who's going to college and so on, I can't always be completely ethical in my practice. Of course, what that means for a doctor is prescribing things that may not be needed or doing extra tests. He didn't describe. Swamiji said he looked into the eyes of that doctor and saw the mental torment that created for him. The practical necessity caused him to bend the rules of Dharma, and the doctor begged Swami for advice. So Swamiji wrote something that he called Material Success and Happiness Through Yogic Principles, which is this wonderful how to live course. But the end of all of that is when Swami Kriyananda publishes basically how to get rich course. A lot of people thought it was kind of crazy. And people challenged him, how does this course that you've done differ from, I think they mentioned Tony Robbins or whoever else was really famous at that time? And Swami's answer was really interesting. His answer was this: I am the disciple of a great master. That was his whole answer. I am a disciple of a great master. And I contemplated that for a long time. I was put in the interesting position of writing publicity for that course, so I had to contemplate it from many angles. From the point of view of publicity, this is what I wrote. Most material success courses are written from the perspective of material success. And people teach us how to move the chess pieces of this world around on the fixed board. And if you do know how to do that, you can get more of the pieces on your side, and you can have a big army on your side, you can have a big house, and you can have lots of money on your side. Swami looked at the material world from the point of view of spiritual power. And the material world is the plaything of the spirit, really. But that doesn't mean that the material world cooperates with the desires of the ego. I am the disciple of a great master. I have one objective, and that objective is to bring people to God. And even when Master himself would describe world wars and depression, and Americans will have half as much money, but which will be twice as happy, as he put it. And many people will be drawn to God through these experiences. That's all that mattered. From our side, we have lots of point of view. What about my children? What about my children's lives? What about my grandchildren? What kind of world will they have? What about my house? What about my money? What about food? It's just like everything is real to us. But to the masters, they say, look at them. They're all coming closer to God. And they're not really noticing the valley of the shadow of death that we're having to walk through to get there. All that they're looking at is that we're moving closer to the light. So the tremendous challenge of being a devotee, of being a human being, is to see it from the perspective on which it is really happening. And to realize that the parts of it that seem so real to us are just the last manifestation. The material world looks like the origin point to us, but everything begins on the causal plane, which is of thought and consciousness. Then it moves to the astral plane, which is magnetizing those thoughts with energy. And then finally, when all that is done, it manifests on the material plane. But we think of it from here and we think the details are the cause. And this is what Shurjo was saying. It's consciousness. And the consciousness that is the issue that is being corrected, and whether this is the start of the corrective that Swami spoke of in 1972 and that Master spoke of in 1950, whether we will look back and see, March 2020, everything began to shift from that point, or whether we'll all get to go back and reopen the economy and just be ourselves again, for another little interlude. I don't know. I don't have any powers like that. But from the point of view of the divine, everything is the same invitation. And the invitation is, do you trust me? Do you love me? What is real to you? Where do you think suffering comes from? Where does happiness come from? Now, don't misunderstand me. I misunderstood Swami Kriyananda for many years in my life. I molded him after my own image, which is, of course, a grave mistake. But this is what we do as human beings. This is what everyone does. We go to the limits of our own understanding, and that's the prism through which we view the world. And we literally can't imagine anything beyond it. Swami used to use it in the concept of animals. He would say, you put a turtle in front of the Mona Lisa, and the turtle's only thought, insofar as he has one, is whether it's edible. He's just not capable of perceiving it as great art, because we can only see what we can see. Animals, as Swami said, are just egos on the spectrum from complete ignorance to God realization. Human beings, by definition, live a little higher up the food chain, but not necessarily much compared to the saints. We can only see what we can see. So for a long time in my life, I thought spiritual life and human life were separate. Somehow that just worked easier for me. I thought you just kind of suppress, turn your back on human life, human feeling, and that's how you get to God. Despite the fact that I could philosophically explain that God is equally present in everything, I didn't actually believe it. I thought that you hold most of life at bay, and then you just live in this tiny little bit that's left, which is called spiritual. And I actually thought that was what Swami was doing, because being a turtle, all I could think of was whether the Mona Lisa was edible or not. And gradually, what I realized, and the key operative word here is fear. I was afraid. I was afraid of being hurt. I was afraid of being disappointed. I was afraid of being inconvenienced. I was afraid of being embarrassed. I was afraid of making mistakes. I mean, the list is long. I mean, you can make yours, I'll make mine. I was just afraid. And fear, according to St. Paul, is the opposite of perfect love. And so I lived in God's creation, but I feared a great deal of it because I've been hurt. Everybody's been hurt. My life in this life has been charmed, is virtually the word for it. But we carry, all of us, we carry deep hurts from past lives. That's what brings us to the spiritual path. My single ambition in life always was to be happy. And I remember saying to Swamiji once, "Sir, I have this driving desire to find the secrets of happiness and to hold on to it. But I have to admit, I've never been unhappy. It's just like I've had a very happy life. It's kind of goofy." And he looked at me kindly, but with a little bit of, maybe you've never considered this, Asha, past lives. Of course, past lives. So much of life disappoints us that eventually we turn to God. And then we have this driving desire for not merely temporary comfort, but for perfect bliss. But my desire for happiness was also based on the fear of unhappiness. And no matter how laudable the ambition that one places on top of that fear, it's still the energy of fear. It's not the energy of love. And I finally figured out from watching carefully over many years that Swamiji was afraid of nothing. He wasn't afraid of humiliation. He wasn't afraid of betrayal. He wasn't afraid of disappointment. He wasn't afraid of death. He wasn't afraid of loss. He wasn't afraid of error. He simply wasn't afraid. And therefore, human life and spiritual life for him was one reality. And he had so many challenges, physical challenges, emotional, the betrayal from his gurubhais, the unrelenting enmity that came his way, endless financial difficulties. I mean, it's just, I'll make a long list. But he was always joyful, even when he was struggling, because there was no resistance in him, because he wasn't afraid. And gradually I began to understand that happiness is not the avoidance of unpleasant circumstances. Happiness is absolute fearlessness in the face of whatever God sends. And, this situation, many situations, we have no idea what's coming. And again, maybe we'll get another respite. I'm old enough that I'll bargain just for a few years if God will give it to me. Some of you are younger and you have children, which I don't have. You worry about their lives. But all of us are here to learn to love God. And that means that everything that prevents us from loving God has to be excised. And so what we have to ask ourselves always in every situation is not what is happening, but what is it bringing out in me? What is it bringing to the surface that I now need to work on? I was caught in a situation many years ago where I had a very difficult karma with one of my very close friends. A friendship in the spiritual context is peculiar, and I had to come to this realization that some of my best friends I didn't like very much because our best friendness was our shared devotion to God and Guru, and our personalities didn't always work. So I had this woman that our personalities didn't work, and we struggled a lot. And finally, circumstances separated us. And when we didn't have to interact every day, I remembered how much I loved her. And so then I had the opportunity, we were traveling together, and I had the opportunity, because I just felt such a open-hearted affection for her. So I actually agreed to be a roommate with her. And after about 15 minutes, I could hardly stand being in the same room with her. It was just, I was immediately just tossed back into all this karma that I thought I'd overcome. I was just so upset. I was literally weeping, and I was talking to Swamiji, and I thought I was free of this, and I'm not free of it. His attitude was, as always, he was so matter of fact. Well, he said, you thought you were free and you weren't. Good news, now you know you can work on it. That was not at all how I felt, not even slightly, but I remembered. So I find myself in this situation and other difficulties I've had over the last few years. And I think, look at that. So much still to work on. That's the good news. And so we start working on it. We can't work on the physical level. Right now, we're all, I don't know how bound you are in Texas, but in California, we're housebound. We're shelter in place, wear a mask when you go out. And that's us. So it's not much we can do physically. But causal and astral, it's a very rich and interesting time to work on everything on the level from which it originates. Because if we can get rid of it at the source, then the manifestation will change. And then whatever the world is doing, it'll just keep doing. I am a disciple of a great master. Thus, my relationship to the physical world is not primary. It is the expression of my relationship to God and Guru. And the more I can bring my relationship with God into order, the more everything else will follow. Convenient, comfortable, as I want it. Gosh, I don't know. But if I'm right with God, then everything else will follow. And Master said, that's why all this is happening, because the world as a whole doesn't relate to a greater reality anymore. And our lack of attunement to a greater reality is just creating huge dissonance individually and globally. And that's the purpose. So if we can get ahead of it, if we can get ahead of the wave and get deeper and deeper into our relationship with God, then everything else will follow in relatively short order. Swami put it to me once. At least it will follow in the way that our hearts will know is correct for us. And really, that's all that matters. So, my friends, questions, thoughts, comments, anything that I could address that you would like to hear more about?
We have a question in the chat window. I don't know if you have that open or not, but what do you think this virus is trying to teach the world?
That we're not in charge. That we can make all our little plans and God thinks it's amusing. And that's the beginning of realizing that we're part of a greater reality. I mean, this is the goofiest thing that really, it's just so goofy. I don't know what your world is like. I mean, we're very fortunate in California because our governor closed the state really early. Our county closed the county before the governor closed the state. So there is very little evidence around us of illness. I mean, we're not New York City. New York City's been very different, but there's very little evidence of illness or threat around us. So we're all living as if we're under siege from this very serious, powerful enemy without any evidence, except that we're all at home. And I'm talking to you over Zoom instead of being in your temple, which is where I was supposed to be in a couple of weeks. Whenever I go out, I wear this marvelous little mask, and all my buddies are wearing these little masks. It's just, but none of it is actually happening, but it's all happening. It's like, this is not the human mind, the human ego does not dictate reality. And there's nothing we can do about it externally. So it's driving us in our fear. It's driving us to look for something that will work. And that's unfortunately how we grow. We grow from experience. We grow from suffering. We don't get what we want. We still want it. It opens our minds to new possibilities. And this will open a lot of people's minds to new possibilities. Not everyone. Some people are just here to go through another incarnation that doesn't end well. But many people, but even to say that, they're going through the necessary stages to get from ignorance to realization. And all of us are equal in the eyes of God. And some of us are here because we're on the cusp of a deeper relationship with God or an opening relationship with God. And that's what we're here to learn. Now, does anybody much on the planet know this? Not actually, but it is coming out in terms of maybe we don't need quite as much stuff as we have. Maybe the frantic pace of life, maybe we don't need that. Maybe our children are being pushed beyond what they should be pushed, just like everything goes away and all of a sudden you ask, why was I doing this anyway? And either by choice or of necessity, we start thinking differently. I mean, the lack of pollution, the dolphins in the canals in Venice, the view of the Himalayas, the clean air in New Delhi. It's not possible just to snap our fingers and change all of that. But people are having experiences they haven't had in a long time. They're also being alone with themselves, which is not always such a happy thing. So people start asking many different questions. We can answer those questions as we choose, but the potential is there to answer them in the direction of light. And many people will choose light.
So we have another question here. It's
there is one in the chat box.
Yeah. What do you think about the government might take this crisis to impose more draconian laws in the name of protecting the people?
I think that God can use anyone to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. When the current president of the United States was elected, I'm not personally fond of him because he is not a refined person, quite apart from his policies, which I don't really pay much attention to. But if you read in the last chapter, one of the later chapters of Swami's autobiography, The New Path, he talks about the fact that this world is not run by governments and presidents and prime ministers. This world is run by great masters and their spiritual families. And governments are the instruments of the karma of the people. The governments do not create the karma of the people. The people get the governments that is the appropriate karma for them. Now, don't misunderstand me. That doesn't mean we're all being punished or rewarded, depending on what kind of governments we have and whether we like them, because everybody's always split about who likes what and what's a good idea and what isn't. But there's national karma, there's global karma, and we, from the astral world, when it's time for us to incarnate, we survey all of the material world. And Master said Earth is just one of many planets. He said the material world is like the gondola under a giant hot air balloon. The material world is very small compared to the astral world. These are words to me. I don't live in the astral world, so I don't really know, but I intuitively believe it. Let's just put it that way. So all over creation, there are planets at different stages in the yuga cycle. I talked a lot about this in my 9 a.m. broadcast. If for those of you who are not watching them, you can go look at those. But there's different planets in different stages in the yuga cycle, which means some planets are more gross, some are more refined in terms of consciousness, not in terms of anything that we would think of that way. And then there are nationalities. And then there are national karmas that are going to have to be worked out, or cultural or ethnic karmas that have to be worked out. Rwanda saw a genocide. Germany was a terrible place to be Jewish, not so long ago. And then Germany became a marvelous place for economic growth. And Switzerland is has been a very secure environment. Hawaii is very relaxing. We have all these different vibrations. So the soul says, and depending how conscious the soul is, perhaps quite consciously with guardian angels, I don't know exactly how it works, we survey the material world and say, what are my lessons and where can I learn them? So we could say, oh, I would like to live in Texas in March 2020 under that particular government, and then there'll be a pandemic, and then the government will use that to oppress all the people. So I will get to be an oppressed person in what used to be a free country. And I will get to learn all kinds of things that I didn't know otherwise, because that government would not be able to impose those restrictions on the people, if they do, unless it was allowed by the masters. You see, are we part of a greater reality? Who is in charge? And we have to ask this question over and over. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't vote. You shouldn't picket if you feel to. You shouldn't. It doesn't mean that you have to be passive in the face of it. But you have to ask yourself always, what is at the core of my motivation? Is it fear? Is it, how dare you do that to me? What is at the core? Because everything emanates from our vibration of consciousness. And this is why often, as people get deeper in the spiritual path, they become less politically active, because they begin to realize that, I myself, I have voted in the last few years because the choices have been a little extreme, but I haven't voted for years, and I still vote only a very little bit, because it's not my world. I feel that they're just egos fighting it out with each other, and I don't know, it's too many shades of gray for me, because everything is actually about consciousness. And we have all the power and all the money and all the technology to make this heaven on earth, but we don't want to, because collectively we're too busy doing other things. I'm talking about mankind as a whole, because this is a planet in early Dwapara. And early Dwapara is not such a great yuga. It's just an insecure, we're in transition. It's still fighting Kali. And so lots of people who incarnated now are really in tune with what's going on. And others of us are here either to help or to learn, or both, actually, to be challenged. So I feel in my lifetime dedication, basically to teaching people to meditate and to love God, I think I'm the most politically active person I know, because I've been trying to solve the problem at the level at which it's really happening, which is I am a disciple of a great master, and this is what we're trying to do. And yeah, I think the government could do all kinds of things, and how governments get these weird powers, Who knows? How did the government get the power to inspire half a country in Rwanda to murder the other half? Who knows? Because human beings are not really in charge. There are these waves of karma that have to come through. Master said America overall has very good karma. We've been very generous, we're very noble, we're a spiritually based country, but we established our country nefariously by our treatment of the Native Americans. That's what Master said. We got our country without Dharma there because of the way we treated those people. And that is, Master said, a lingering karma that this country has to pay off. And we will have to go through, he said, hard times, but we will triumph in the end. Isn't that interesting? He said, many countries will be destroyed, but America will not be destroyed because fundamentally our karma is good. Interesting, huh?
We have one quick question. I think it'll be a short one.
I'm not sure. Okay.
Jyoti asks if Light Bearer is available on Audible.
Light Bearer is available on Audible. I recorded it. So you can, if you go to Amazon or wherever you go, it's available. It's an ebook, and it's also a recorded book with my voice. I recorded it. And many people tell me that's the best version of it. They like it best, the one that I've read. So Light Bearer, which I don't have a copy that I can hold up, so I'll just pretend I'm holding it up. Here it is. I have to say, just for myself, it's a really good book. And it's 220,000 words. So you have a little bit of time right now to read it. It's 45 years of my life with Swami, year by year, chronologically. And I did the very best I could with that book, and I feel very happy with it. To me, it's like, I've never raised children, but to me, it's like a grown child. It's like I had something to do with getting it to its adult life, but now it's just out there having its own life. So if you have any interest in Swamiji or Ananda, really what the book is, it's how to be a disciple, because it was a very up close observation of a great disciple living a real life. So I highly recommend it for all of you. You know, and for online, there's a YouTube channel. Oh, there it is. Supriya's holding it up, that beautiful picture of Swamiji on the front. Yeah, I really, if you love this path, try that book. I think you'll like it. And if you just Google Asha Nayaswami, you'll find, but I have a channel on YouTube we are approaching 1,000 videos, if you can believe it. And every day during this at 9 a.m., weekdays, most weekdays, and at noon, I've been on broadcast, and then sometimes even more than that. But the 9 a.m.s have been the fun ones. Just good morning, here we are again. Nothing has changed, kind of energy. So is there more? What can we do?
Did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that Light Bearer, the book Light Bearer, was a life-saving book for me. I think I wrote you about that when my mother was dying. I picked that up, and you said a book on discipleship. It just helped so much with attunement at a very important time. It was just infused with divine energy that was very supportive of me. And even though it had, ostensibly nothing to do with the situation I was in, it had everything to do with it.
I do understand. It was my life's work. As soon as that book was published, I felt I could take my last breath and I'll be fine. I think he's going to have me stick around a little while longer, and I really felt that Swami dictated it to me. I mean, he guided me. Nothing in that book is, I don't feel. I mean, I don't say that in any pretentious way. It's just, he was just there. I was mostly in seclusion writing it, and he sat with me and he told me what was right and what was wrong. So that's why I feel very impersonal about it. When you just do the best you can do, then there's just nothing to think about. It just has its own reality. And that's how I feel about that book. It has a divine purpose for those who are drawn to it. And I urge you to consider whether that might be you.
Thank you so much, Asha. We could go on all day, but we're just
And we will if you let us.
Yeah. But
invite me back. Invite me back. I mean,
we will.
You can see where I'm sitting. I'm sitting in my own little meditation room. This is not a hardship. I have my own cup of coffee right in front of me, and I have nothing much to do except this. So I'm more than happy to get online with you guys anytime you would like it, anytime at all. Seriously.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we will take you up on that
Yeah,
for
we'll
sure.
definitely take you up on that.
Yeah,
Very
we can touch and answer anything you want, anytime at all.
been so special, just so special. Thank you so much.
Well, it's a joy. Thank you for inviting me. God bless you all.
God bless you.
God bless you, Asha.
Thank you, Asha. Okay.
Any word of wisdom to wrap us up?
Oh, just if you'd like to donate, anybody would like to donate, this is on our Facebook or on our Facebook page. There's a donate button. There's also one on AnandaDallas.org. If this program has been helpful to you and inspiring to you, we appreciate those donations. And also check out our other online activities. We've got stuff every day of the week. And we've got free meditation offerings for if you know of anybody that wants to learn how to meditate that we've just added, and kirtans on Friday nights and yoga on Friday early evening too. So lots of new things getting added, and thank you all for joining us.
And if there's anybody out there who would like to add something, who would like to teach something, then please let us know. You know, whatever subject matter or area you feel comfortable with actually conducting a class in, we'd love to have you. So please let us know.
All right. God bless everybody. And you can tune into Ananda.org at 1 o'clock if you'd like Sunday service with Ananda worldwide. So, all right. God bless.